that I have in my lifetime enjoyed a lot of the wilderness areas and national parks, and just last week I was in Montana, Glacier National Park, another area that's like a wilderness area up near Terriot Pass on the Canadian border. So I understand the significance of setting aside some of this federal land for future generations and to protect it against development and just conserve these wild and scenic places. But I noticed in Mr. Rosenblum's statement that historically some border enforcement operations on certain federal lands have been compromised because of the Department of Interior and Bureau of Land Management and other federal land managers prioritize conservation and their own core missions over the Department of Homeland Security's law enforcement goals. We've got a situation as exemplified in Arizona, as we heard, where these wild and scenic places are being violated by smugglers and human traffickers and others that are coming through. Mr. Pierce showed on the screen a picture of piles of dirty diapers and refuse that has just been dumped over and over and over. And we have people from Arizona. I was talking with Mr. Swikert from Arizona earlier, and he said, you know, civic organizations would go down and they would work with CBP, who would actually be there with them, and they would police the area and they would clean up all the garbage through these canyons. And when they were talking to the CBP officers, they said this will last for about a week. Mr. Judd, have you or any of your agents that you represent ever encountered human or narcotic smuggling groups or any other group of illegal aliens that made an effort to protect the environment?
No, sir.
Don't you think, and wouldn't you agree with me, that members of Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, that are trying to do their job, working within the jurisdictions of other agencies, don't you think they would do all in their power to make sure that these significant areas where there might be some sort of flora or fauna that's sensitive, wouldn't they try to make every effort to protect that?
Yes, sir. In fact, we just had an agent out of Ajo that was issued an accommodation for finding pottery and not spoiling the area that was estimated to be a couple hundred years old. And this just happened 2 weeks ago, I believe. So, yeah, we take every effort to...
Drug cartels are going to take the path of least resistance if they're trying to evade and escape from law enforcement and get into this country and bring their wares in. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, you just have to look at Arizona to see that that's what's happening.
So should the public expect to see an area like Oregon Mountain and Desert Peak, should they expect to see increased pollution as a result of Border Patrol's reduced presence?
If you take out law enforcement from any area, you can expect to see crime go up.
Let me ask you this. In the 2006 Memorandum of Understanding with the Department of Interior and Agriculture, all parties acknowledge that CBP operations and construction within the 60-foot Roosevelt Reservation of May 27, 1907, and that's along the U.S.-Mexico border, and the 60-foot Taft Reservation of May 3, 1912, and that's along the U.S.-Canadian border, 60-foot wide strip. Is that consistent? It is consistent with the purpose of those reservations, and that any CBP activity, including but not limited to operations and construction within the 60-foot reservation, is outside the oversight and control of federal land managers. That's a fact, okay? And the Memorandum of Understanding states that. But let me ask you this. Is 60 foot enough to effectively ensure and secure the U.S.-Mexican border?
Absolutely not.
Do you think that well, let me ask you this. What's wide enough? Is it a mile? Is it 5 miles? What sort of exclusion zone should we have along
Well, every area is different, but what you have to have is you have to have a series of roads that allows us to get ahead of the trafficking. Because, again, if we're reduced to 60 feet, once they get past us, then we're pushing from behind them. If we can't get ahead of them, we don't even have the opportunity to arrest them. They're going to be what we call gotaways.
Right. I'm going to get back to the National Monument there and ask Sheriff Garrison, which I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate you being willing to come here, Sheriff. Shortly after the National Monument designation by President Obama, you were quoted by the Associated Press as saying, if we have no ability to patrol that area, crime is going to increase. It will be akin to the Oregon Pipe National Monument in Arizona. I wonder how many years it will be before we have to post signs that say, "Enter at your own risk." Those are your words. So can you explain the similarities between Oregon Pipe in Arizona and the Oregon Mountain in New Mexico and what we may or may not see?
Thank you, sir. I think the only thing I can say is that, I've learned from my experience and seeing what's happened there in Oregon Pipe because of the way it's set up and because of its proximity to the border and everything else. I believe the same thing is going to happen in the Oregon, in the new one that was just created. It's close to the border and it has the same kind of nexus to the border with the criminal activity going on. The same. It's not as much as is in Arizona, but I believe it'll grow stronger and become more as time goes on. So, speaking with some of the city council and county commissioners in my community, I told them the same thing. They said, "Well, that's in Arizona. That's not here." And I said, "But it's the same thing."
You've been patrolling, you and your deputies have been patrolling this area for years before it had the
Yes, sir.
federal designation. You know the area, you know the routes that may be used. Do you feel like your efforts will be hampered by the closure of this to your entry?
I do. I feel like the local law enforcement is the only law enforcement that's never been at the table in these conversations. I think the Border Patrol and other federal agencies have been at the table whenever they discuss these things. My problem with that is I don't have a problem with the Border Patrol. We work hand in hand with each other. We help each other out. We backed up a number of Border Patrolmen. They come and help us out at times. But when a crime happens on this land, Border Patrol doesn't take care of that. That falls into the hands of the Sheriff's Office. If there's a murder or a dead body in the desert, we have to respond to that. So if we lose access to this land, I don't know how we're supposed to get out there to do it. And I do believe that the patrols that we've been doing out there have curbed the criminal activity down some. There are always going to be those people to get through and hauling drugs or other people. But the fact that we're out there as much as we are, I believe that we have kept them pushed over into Arizona and into Texas.
Right. Do you believe that this area will become that the drug cartel recognize this open area where there is a void of law enforcement and it will become a corridor for human smuggling, drug trafficking, and illegal immigration issues through this corridor?
Yes, sir, I do. You have right across the border is Juarez, Mexico, and has been one of the most deadliest cities in the world for quite some time. And with all the criminal activity and the cartel activity over there, being one of the largest heroin producers, I believe that this corridor will open that up and it'll get worse. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. My time's up. I'll yield to and recognize the ranking member, Mr. Barber.